I'm gonna read another story from here. But first, I want to say thank you to all of you who've subscribed to my channel. I made 30 subscribers yesterday, so thank you for that. I know this channel's been kind of sloppy from the beginning because I'm only filming on my phone and I don't have much, tools and stuff like equipment to make really good videos. Sorry, my dog's rolling around. He always does that as soon as I start a video. Anyways, thank you for sticking around, especially if you were here from the beginning, which was in July last year, in 2023. And, there was spots where I wasn't making any videos because of, my sister had passed away in August, and so there was a lot of stuff going on. And so thank you for those of you who stuck around with my kind of sloppy ASMR videos. And all those times when I wasn't always posting, it was very irregular, maybe like once a week or something. But you stuck around. So thank you for that. And thank you to those of you who joined me. This is actually a book that my sister gave me. This was her fairy tale book that she had when she was a kid. And she wasn't really into reading, but I was, so she gave it to me. I'm going to cover my name because I wrote it, but that's her handwriting. Yeah. So thank you for those of you who stuck around all this time. So this one's called The Golden Touch. I think this one is a bit longer. Let me see. There's a cool illustration. A little bit of spoilers, but I mean, it's an old fairy tale. So, yeah, this one's a bit longer. This might take more than 2 parts. Yeah. So I'm just gonna get started reading that. Gonna get some more coffee. And thank you to those of you who left such nice comments yesterday. Thank you for that. Anyways, The Golden Touch. Once upon a time, there lived a very rich man and a king besides, whose name was Midas. And he had a little daughter whom nobody but myself ever heard of, and whose name I either never knew or have entirely forgotten. So because I love odd names for little girls, I chose to call her Marigold. The King Midas was fonder of gold than anything else in the world. He valued his royal crown chiefly because it was composed of that precious metal. If he loved anything better, or half so well, it was because of the one little maiden who played so merrily around her father's footstool. But the more Midas loved his daughter, the more did he desire and seek for wealth. Bye. What's wrong with you? I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. He just wants me to scratch his belly for a minute. Sorry. I think he's okay now. He thought, foolish man, that the best thing he could possibly do for his dear child would be to bequeath her the immensest pile of yellow, glistening coin that had ever been heaped together since the world was made. Thus he gave all his thoughts and all his time to this one purpose. If ever he happened to gaze for an instant at the gold-tinted clouds of sunset, he wished that they were real gold, and that they could be squeezed safely into a strong box. When little Marigold ran to meet him with a bunch of buttercups and dandelions, he used to say, "Popo, child, if these flowers were as golden as they look, they would be worth plucking." And yet, in his earlier days, before he was so entirely possessed of his insane desire for riches, King Midas had shown a great taste for flowers. He had planted a garden in which grew the biggest and beautifulest and sweetest roses that any mortal ever saw or smelt. These roses were still growing in the garden, as large and as lovely and as fragrant as when Midas used to pass whole hours in gazing at them and inhaling their perfume. But now, if he looked at them at all, it was only to calculate how much the garden would be worth if each of the innumerable rose petals were a thin plate of gold. And though he once was fond of music, in spite of an idle story about his ears, which were said to resemble those of an ass, the only music for poor Midas now was the chink of one coin against another. At length, as people always grow more and more foolish, unless they take care to grow wiser and wiser, Midas had got to be so exceedingly unreasonable that he could scarcely bear to see or touch any object that was not gold. He made it his custom, therefore, to pass a large portion of every day in a dark and dreary apartment underground, at the basement of his palace. It was here that he kept his wealth. To this dismal role, for it was little better than a dungeon, Midas betook himself. Whenever he wanted to be particularly happy, here, after carefully locking the door, he would take a bag of gold coin, or a gold cup as big as a washbowl, or a heavy golden bar, or a peck measure of gold dust, and bring them from the obscure corners of the room into the one bright and narrow sunbeam that fell from the dungeon-like window. He valued the sunbeam for no other reason but that his treasure would not shine without its help. And then would he reckon over the coins in his bag, toss up the bar, and catch it as it came down, sift the gold dust through his fingers, look at the funny image of his own face as it reflected in the burnished circumference of the cup, and whispered to himself, "O Midas, rich King Midas, what a happy man art thou!" But it was laughable to see how the image of his face kept grinning at him out of the polished surface of the cup. It seemed to be aware of his foolish behavior, and to have a naughty inclination to make fun of him. Midas called himself a happy man, but felt that he was not yet quite so happy as he might be. The very tip-top of enjoyment would never be reached unless the whole world were to become his treasure room, and be filled with yellow metal which should be all his own. Now I hardly remind such wise little people as you are, that in old times, when King Midas was alive, a great many things came to pass, which we should consider wonderful if they were to happen in our own day and country. And on the other hand, a great many things take place nowadays, which seem not only wonderful to us, but at which the people of old times would have stared their eyes out. On the whole, I regard our own times as the strangest of the two, but however that might be, I must go on with my story. Midas was enjoying himself in his treasure room one day as usual, when he perceived a shadow fall over the heaps of gold, and looking suddenly up, what should he behold but the figure of a stranger, standing in the bright and narrow sunbeam. It was a young man, with a cheerful and ruddy face. Whether it was that the imagination of King Midas threw a yellow tinge over everything, or whatever the cause might be, he could not help fancying that the smile with which the stranger regarded him had a kind of golden radiance in it. Certainly, although his figure intercepted the sunshine, there was now a brighter gleam upon the piled up treasures than before. Even the remotest corners had their share of it, and were lighted up, when the stranger smiled, as with the tips of flame and sparkles of fire. As Midas knew that he had carefully turned the key in the lock, and that no mortal strength could possibly break his treasure room, he of course concluded that his visitor must be something more than mortal. It is no matter about telling you who he was in those days when the earth was comparatively a new affair. It was supposed to be often the resort of beings endowed with supernatural power, and who used to interest themselves in the joy and sorrows of men, women, and children, half playfully and half seriously. Midas had met such beings before now, and was not sorry to meet one of them again. The stranger's aspect, indeed, was so good-humoured and kindly, if not beneficent, that it would have been unreasonable to suspect him of intending any mischief. It was far more probable that he came to do Midas a favour, and what could that favour be unless to multiply his heaps of treasure? I'm going to get some coffee. Okay. The stranger gazed about the room, and when his lustrous smile had glistened upon all the golden objects that were there, he turned again to Midas. "You are a wealthy man, friend Midas," he observed. "I doubt whether any other four walls on earth contain so much gold as you have contrived to pile up in this room." "I've done pretty well," answered Midas, in a contented tone. "But after all, it is but a trifle, and you consider that it has taken me my whole life to get it together. If one could live 1,000 years, he might have much time to grow rich." "What?" exclaimed the stranger. "Then you are not satisfied?" Midas shook his head. "And pray what would satisfy you?" asked the stranger, merely for the curiosity of the thing. "I should be glad to know." I might stop there for now. That's the illustration. I guess that's Midas, and that's the guy he's talking to right now.